Welcome to They Mostly Potted at Night. Mostly, I am Salem, joined by my co-host Graveyard.
Hello.
This is episode 53 of our weekly All Things Horror podcast. Would you watch a box of old tapes in your new house that says "Don't Watch" clearly labeled on the box? Can you not blink for an hour and then feel butterfly kisses? Hate those words. What happens when you build on an old pagan temple ground? Join us as we... Yeah, exactly. Join us as we go into things maybe better left not found. Yes. We're doing 3 found footage movies this week. We're doing the Poughkeepsie tapes, the Borderlands, or as it is known in the U.S., Final Prayer, and then Butterfly Kisses.
Yes.
So I guess these are in, chronological order. I did not look to see what years they came out in.
They are.
So we'll start with the Poughkeepsie tapes. And I will just roll right into the recap unless there's anything you want to say ahead of time.
No, let's get into this. These are 3 of the next 20 things we plan for found footage tapes.
Well, yeah, there's so
many.
There is a lot of found footage movies, and there's also franchises that have blossomed out of these things. So some of them have 4 or 5 sequels. I guess probably because they're easy to make, I would guess. But you have Paranormal Activity, which has 8 movies now,
something like that.
There's Rec, who has, I think there's 4, right?
4 Spanish, yeah. and then the American remake Quarantine and its sequel,
right?
Obviously VHS that we've discussed last year,
right? Yeah, I mean there's a bunch. I mean those are just the ones that have made big franchises out of it. I mean, there's a lot more that have had just a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot of these. There's a lot of these movies. Oh, Blair Witch. Blair Witch is another one. I guess they only had really 2
found
sequels.
Footage. Yeah, well, only 2 were found footage. The Book of Shadows was a straight up movie.
Yeah. You know what? I think that movie gets crapped on a lot, but I like that movie. I thought it was a good movie.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah, I'm just I'm throwing out my my hot take right now. I like the second one. I know nobody does, but I did. Anyway, so we will do the Poughkeepsie tapes, 2007.
Yep.
So eventually it basically starts out with the police find this house that a serial killer once lived in, and inside this house is like 1,000 VHS videotapes.
There's a lot.
Yeah, and they're all numbered sequentially, so you could watch them in a specific order. And basically it's them saying hey, we found it in this house. The guy was gone. There's no evidence of this guy in this house at all. There's other things in the house, but we'll talk about that later. So basically it's they're going through these tapes, and they're basically learning that there's a whole lot of murders that happened. We'll get into a few of them. There's a whole bunch of murders that happened that essentially the police had not put them together as being the same person at all. Right. Because this guy was basically smart enough to keep changing up his MO, keep changing up his methods, not only his murder methods, but also his body disposal methods. He basically kept, every time he felt like something was getting too close to him, he just completely changed. He never stopped killing, but he just completely changed what he did. So the police never put it together that it was all the same person.
Right. Just as an example, they talk about with your first dismemberment, they're okay, you're using a hacksaw, but that's taking too much time. So you go to a circular saw, but he goes, no, he'd go back and forth. He would just change however he felt like it, just to throw everything off track.
Right. Yeah. So again, that guy mentioned, we didn't put this stuff together because no one does that, or at least, they haven't found anyone yet that's done it.
Right.
So they start off with his first victim, and his first victim is he was angry. So he pulls up outside a house with a little girl sitting outside, an 8-year-old girl. And he walks up to her. This is all obviously being taped. He walks up to her and he's trying to get her to talk to him. And then he basically hits her in the head with something, We don't see what it is. I mean, maybe the camera. I don't know. It doesn't show what it is. But he hits her in the head with something and basically abducts her and runs away with her.
Yes.
And they basically, we don't see like the whole murder part of that, but we find out that she was raped and murdered, and then body disposed of like 50 miles away.
Right.
And then the second video that he does is like he pretends to be a hitchhiker and that his car broke down, and then this couple picks him up, and he's like, oh yeah, there's this gas station right off this exit over here. So they get off on the exit and there's like no gas station. It's very, very remote. When he basically kills the because it's like a husband and wife duo, he kills the husband with a hammer, and then he grabs the woman with like a chloroform rag, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, he like holds the camera out while he's like chloroforming her to like get her facial reaction and stuff. And so and they end up it's disturbing how they find it. Anyway, they basically, what he does is the guy is like dead pretty much right away. But
yes.
What he does is he decapitates the guy. He cuts open the woman's like stomach, puts the guy's head in her stomach, and then like sews it back up. But like the face is kind of sticking out.
Right.
And then he wakes her up to show her what he's done. Which is, I mean, it's not pleasant. But anyway, and then they basically figure out, okay, well, this is this remote area, like they were traveling from this location to this location. There's only a couple of highways that they could have taken. So they basically like backtrack, like, okay, this car that they have is like a crappy car that can only go so far on a tank of gas. So like they have to look and see where the last place they got gas is, and they go to all these gas stations and they get footage and stuff, and they actually find footage of the killer. He's smart enough. He's covered himself up so you can't see who it is. And then he looks at the camera and he's like doing sign language to the camera. And the sign language decodes as like Red House, which was the name of a bar that he buried the bodies behind.
Right.
So this is before he even committed the murder. So he had already planned out where he was going to bury them before he even did it. So at this point, they realized, okay, this guy with this particular murder was like very smart and had this all planned out, but they haven't connected it to any of the other murders.
Right. And, I'll just throw this out there right now. The reason why this is good analog horror is because this takes place, 1994? Right. So, like, the closed circuit TV, it's all, I mean, it looks like crap because, 1994,
right.
95. Right.
We'll get into that. I'll make some comments on that later. So basically, that's the second one. There's other ones in between that we don't get shown. Where I guess we're just getting shown like the major beats in these tapes. And then he said his next victim is like this teenage girl that he kidnaps from her house. We get like a long extended scene of like him like sneaking around inside the house because it's her and her boyfriend in the house. Like her parents are gone for the weekend, and it's her and her boyfriend in the house, and they're all like kind of like sneaking around, or not them. He's sneaking around in the house, like hiding in the closet, but he like sets the camera out to like watch them, and I guess they never noticed the camera. But like 94, it would have been a pretty decent sized camera.
Yes.
So, and it uses full side VHS tapes. So like, yeah, it's one of the old school big ones. But yeah, so they don't ever see the camera. But essentially, he follows them around while they're like, getting ready for the night and eating dinner and like watching a movie. And eventually they like fall asleep on the couch. And then they wake up and she's like, okay, I'm going to go to bed. And he's like, okay, I'm going to do something in the kitchen. And then so she goes up to go to bed. He goes in the kitchen. The guy chases him down and basically like stabs him to death. Yeah. It stabs him enough to like make him not move anymore in the kitchen. She sees this happen. He chases her down, knocks her out, then goes back and like, mutilates the dude. And then essentially kidnaps her. Now everybody, they show like news footage and stuff because apparently he just, tapes the news and stuff too, of course, about his crimes and stuff.
Yeah.
So they basically assume that she's also dead because, the guy was like brutally murdered.
Right.
So they're assuming that she's dead and they don't know what happens to her. But essentially, the videos, we know what happens to her because he keeps her as his slave in his house. And he had her kidnapped for years. Like, I don't know if they say how long it was, but it was years.
Right, because they talk about this is all like a documentary, true crime style, and the guy who's going over the VHS tapes, he's what looks like he's in a mausoleum, right? And they have all the tapes laid out. He's like, here's the first, these 50 tapes are the first like 8 victims. These next 900 are her.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He's like, the majority of them are all her because when he like tortures her like essentially all day, every day, and he tapes everything.
Right.
And he goes, just crazy psychological torture, like, getting her to say stuff that she doesn't want to say and like getting her to call him master and all this weird, getting her to dress up in these weird ass, like doll clothes and stuff. I mean, it's
and mask. Yeah.
Yeah. It's bizarre. And then as time goes by, we see like he's still bringing other victims to his house, but he like gets her involved in it.
Right.
Like so she does like weird creepy dances to like scare them and freak them out and stuff. He even makes her like kill them a couple times. Obviously she's not like getting enjoyment out of it. She's doing it because she's been essentially tortured into doing whatever he says.
Psychology tortured and brainwashed.
Right. So that goes on again for unknown amount of time, but years for sure. And we see a little bit of her, we see like her parents like begging for her to come back. We see a scene where like he goes up to like tell the mom like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll help you. And she like, I don't know how she recognizes him, but she knows it's him and like kind of chases him away.
Yeah. And something we should point out too, when we see him in the videos, he's wearing a death mask, like an old school bubonic plague death mask.
Right. Yeah. Which they go on they describe it as being like an Italian, like theatrical thing or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're talking. Whatever. They go on this whole thing about what his outfit means, and stuff like that. But anyway, so the next section is essentially, he felt like, I don't know if he felt like the police were getting close to him or if he just wanted to play a game with the police, whatever it was. As essentially, there's this guy who was a cop that, basically got framed for all these murders. Not necessarily all of his murders, but all the murders that he committed during this time period.
Yeah.
So they started calling him what was it? The butcher, the something street butcher.
The what? Not what street?
Water Street butcher.
Yeah.
So they call him the Water Street butcher. And he's like, he has like a very specific MO. He has a very specific way that he kills them, a very specific way that he disposes of the bodies. And then they find like sperm on the bodies.
Right.
So they're able to like DNA track who this is. That again, they can, track all of the people because most of them, they got the same traces on their bodies and all that kind of stuff. It basically comes back to this police officer.
James Foley.
Yeah. And they have all of this evidence against the cop. He goes to court and they keep trying to give him a plea deal. And he's like, no, like I'm innocent. I'm not going to give a plea deal. I'm going to fight for my innocence. And he gets convicted and gets the death penalty.
Right.
And this is like the fastest death penalty, like moving forward I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I think it was like 5 years from like when he got convicted to when they killed him, which is there's no way.
Yes. Cause he got convicted. He got caught in 96 and then was executed September 9th, 2001.
Well, yeah, right. Which is, I mean, it's so stupid. I mean, like it's completely unbelievable. Because I mean, even people that are like definitively guilty, like Gacy, right? John Wayne Gacy, definitively guilty. There's so much evidence that it's overwhelming. The dead people were in his house. He had direct connections to all of these people. There's like mountains of evidence to convict him. It took him 20 years.
Right.
Because you have to go through your whole first thing, and like death penalty, you get automatic appeals. You cannot waive them. You have to do them because that's part of the death penalty process. You have to go through all these appeals, and you have to like wait a certain amount of time, and then you have to wait on death row. Like I think the shortest death row wait is like 10 years. And that's after your appeals are done.
Which we should also point out that in this time frame, the FBI profilers were talking to Ted Bundy, who wasn't executed in this James Foley timeline. You know what I mean? Like he Foley was tried and executed in a time frame that Ted Bundy was still alive and hasn't gotten killed by execution yet, right?
Yeah, well, again, it's all over the place. I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
this part is like very unbelievable. I'm like, there's no way, especially if the dude was a cop.
Yeah,
there is no way that they would execute him 5 years after he was convicted. That does not happen. Anyway, so whatever. In this world that this exists in, he gets convicted. He gets put to death. Like I said, it's like right before September 11th happens.
Right.
And then right after he gets executed, they essentially get like a package in the mail. They open up the package, and it's like the guy, the real, Water Street Butcher, the guy who made all these tapes, says like missed one, and he like sent them to this location. They found a dead body, and they basically find evidence on this dead body to find out that guy did not do it.
Right, and he sent it to the convicted cop's partner.
Right. Yeah, so he was obviously watching the whole case. So essentially what they found out or what they could piece together is that that cop had like made a deposit at a fertility bank at some point in the past. And somehow this killer had gotten a hold of that and was using that to plant his DNA sperm on all these bodies.
Right.
And he would make sure that he was killing them and dumping them on days when the cop like wasn't working or didn't have an alibi.
Or was out of town on family vacation, and he went to those areas where the cop was.
Right.
And killed people there.
Right, yeah. So he was obviously watching this guy's every step and made sure that his murders coincided with where he was, and he was planting evidence on them. And so the guy gets basically exonerated. They basically figure out it wasn't him. I mean, obviously he's already dead. But he gets exonerated, on the day after 9/11.
Right.
So, of course, no one reads the news about that because it's 9/11. Of course, that's where everything's going to go. So, like, everybody still thinks he's the Water Street Butcher because nobody ever saw the news that said he was exonerated.
Right.
So everybody just assumes it was that guy that did it. And I think they interview like his son, who says it's like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
But anyway, so now they get back to, how they found the house is they reversed engineered, or is this is where they did the thing, right? Now I thought they did it earlier with maybe they did it again.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. They somehow reversed it.
He was, they traced some, he was the way he sent the maps to the things is he used MapQuest. They said the requests only came, these requests for these places only came from this location, and that's how they found his house.
Right, and then they go in the house, and the guy had cleared out, and he apparently had planned or at least prepared for them finding the house because there was no DNA and no fingerprints in the entire house.
Right.
But this was the house that all of the tapings of like Cheryl's torture and all that stuff was in. This was definitely that house, but somehow he had cleaned it to the point where they couldn't get any information about it. But they did find Cheryl. She was like locked in a box and barely alive.
She's missing some limbs.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she is not looking good.
No.
But they do find her. She is still alive. They bring her to the hospital. And then initially she was doing better, and then she was getting worse again, and they couldn't figure out why. But essentially what she was doing is like, since her life only like subsisted of like pain up until this point,
pain, they said,
right, like pain and torture, she was, when nobody was looking, she was torturing herself because again, that was like her norm at that point was pain. And so when she wasn't feeling pain, she didn't feel right. So she was torturing herself when they weren't looking. So they had to have somebody watch her all the time to get her to stop doing that.
Right.
And then this is like a couple of years have gone by since then. They finally like convince her to like do an interview. And you go in there and she basically is like, ultra Stockholm syndrome, to where she feels like he loves her. And that's just the way that he shows his love, is torturing her. But she wants him to come back and take her away again. And we get to see like, she's like missing at least one hand. I mean, it's like, it's not good. But yeah, she is like still like majorly messed up. You wouldn't think they'd brought her like a therapist that would like deprogram her. Like years later, you'd hope that she'd get past that, but apparently not. And then they show a little note afterwards that like, she killed herself 2 weeks after that interview.
Right, because during the interview, she's going, "What do you want me to say? Tell me what to say."
Right. Yeah. She doesn't know how to think for herself, more or less. But the thing is, after she dies and gets buried, somebody digs her body up and takes it. Again, we're assuming it's the killer guy. But essentially, he steals that body, whatever. But yeah, the guy was never caught. Right. So they have all of these tapes, like detailing all of his crimes up to that certain point, but they never found him. And the guy that they, executed for, the crimes, obviously he was exonerated then, but he's double exonerated because they have video evidence that it was not him that did it. It was video evidence showing him, this other killer guy, killing people.
Right.
So yeah, it was like he was double innocent. But yeah, and essentially then, the movie just ends, like wondering, is that guy going to watch the movie? And they're going to watch the movie theaters and hope that the killer comes to watch it.
Right.
They're watching for people watching it multiple times. Right.
Right. Because he's going to want to watch his work over and over and over.
Right. Yeah. And then they're like there's an end credit scene of like, him basically torturing and killing another woman.
Yep.
It doesn't say who the woman is or whatever, but it's just essentially another post-credit scene of another murder, and then that's it. The end.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, why don't you roll into your first thoughts then? I don't think you've seen any of these. I know I have not.
No, I haven't seen anything. This one is like basically it's like, I would say it's like true crime, like porn, right?
Yeah.
It's like somebody that's like obsessed with true crime and was like, what if somebody was like so smart that they would like think beyond all this stuff and like throw out all the cops' theories and stuff by doing all these different wacky things. And they basically just like made it a reality into this movie. Is what it felt like to me.
Yes.
It felt like somebody that was obsessed with true crime that was like, what if somebody was so whacked out that no one could ever find them? But what if he like taped everything and they found the tapes or something? And that's what it felt like to me. It just felt like true crime porn of like somebody being like, this is how, they could do it and never get caught.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that. It's like, what if Dexter, but, not killing just bad people, but just killing people just out of pleasure and just because he can't. Like, it's Dexter meets like the Zodiac Killer almost.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was definitely interesting. It was a hard watch with psychological torture a little bit. Obviously, right. But this is supposed to be a true crime mockumentary. So like, gore or anything like that, there really wasn't any. So
there was some. It wasn't
some, but not. But it was never, everything that all the worst things they talk about is usually shown off camera and just said it's so bad we can't even show it. We have a hard time discussing it.
Yeah, or they have like the weird VHS effect covered.
Right. Yes.
So one of the two.
Yeah. So what were your highlights for this movie?
I mean, I like the idea of the killer. I mean, yeah, I said it before about, like a true crime guy making it up. Yeah, I get that. I was kind of poking fun at them a little bit, but I mean, the idea of it is interesting. I mean, like, what if there was a killer who was that smart that could distance himself that much from it to think beyond, like, hey, I'll mix up my, MO. Hey, I'll mix up the way I dismember stuff. Hey, I'll mix up, this. Hey, I'll frame other people for doing it. Like stuff like that, which is things that serial killers don't do.
Right.
Yeah, because they have like, that weird emotional part of them that makes them do it, which also makes them, not great at covering it up or avoiding it. So it's basically like, yeah, a serial killer that's able to like remove himself enough to like go, okay, if I want to do this and not get caught, here's what I should do. Which is, again, it's an interesting concept. I mean, I guess it may have happened. Who knows? I mean, if it was a person like this that really existed and didn't tape everything, they would have no idea.
Right.
As they shown, the police would not put together the different things at all. I mean, as we've seen in real life, right? Like the Golden State Killer that they just recently found.
Yeah.
Like they had no idea that they used to call him the original Night Stalker before they called him the Golden State Killer. But like there was another person called the East Area Rapist that like raped, I don't know, it was like 20, 30 some people in like these certain like neighborhoods, right? And they had no idea that they were the same person until they went back and started, DNA testing old cold case stuff. And they found out that they were genetically DNA matched. They had no idea they were the same person. And so after that, they like looked into it like, okay, now we can look into it a little bit further. And then they went even further and they found out there was, before the East Area Rapist, there was a guy called, what was it? Some town, the Ransacker. Huh. And he was just a person that would break into people's houses, like do weird stuff, like eat food out of their fridge, and just like hang out in their house and like put things in wrong drawers. And like, they would steal stuff, but it would be like little stuff that doesn't make sense, but it was like things were obviously gone through and people were obviously broken into the house and gone through a whole bunch of shit. But yeah, so essentially he started out breaking in, entering and ransacking stuff, ramped up to rape, and then ramped up to being a full-on serial killer, and then just stopped for years. They caught him when he was like, he was like 70 something.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah,
right. So like, so he had killed his last woman in the 80s. So like for 30 years, he hasn't done anything, well, as far as serial killing or raping, as far as they could find. So he just stopped. I mean, again, so like, yeah, there's a very real possibility that there's a lot more stuff like that. Like if somebody was smarter and didn't let their DNA spray all over the scene, you know what I mean? That they would never put those things together. I mean, there's probably a lot out there. Like there's a lot of serial killers that stopped, that they never caught, that they're assuming are dead. Or, just like this guy, they could just stop doing it.
Right.
It's bizarre. There's a lot of things behind the scenes that may or may not make sense. And again, that's a lot of these amateur sleuth people try to push those theories on stuff. But it's a non-zero chance that there's some of this stuff is connected out there.
Right.
So again, that idea is good. I like that idea.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, it was a movie for what you could tell they had some limited means there, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And again, like we were talking about, they cover up some of like the gory type stuff with like VHS effects, or they cut away stuff like that, and that would be stuff that would take like effects. We're talking like makeup work, stuff like that to like that would be like money because you'd have to pay people to do that kind of stuff. They just kind of cut away, or they just covered up if it looked bad. Which I'm guessing it all looked bad because like basically everything was covered up. So I mean, yeah, the idea of it was good. I mean, they did a decent job with what they had. I mean, I think the people that were discussing it in like kind of like a documentary, like true crime documentary, like a Dateline kind of thing, I thought they did a great job. But yeah, I mean, they portrayed the people exactly like those Dateline people do, and I think that was their point, their purpose.
Right.
So I think they did a good job there.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. I completely agree. I like the idea of it, and someone that is smart enough that is able to step away, as you said, emotionally from it, change their MO, and really, as they point out multiple times, play the system. Right? They talk about, they have a scene where the guy's going, here's all the profiles that were built on about this guy. Right? Like, oh, he's, smart, but he's not smart. He's clean, but he's dirty. He's all this stuff, changing his MOs because it's the idea of it, is that he can always be really ahead of the cops, and they're trying to rely on his voyeurism to catch him potentially.
Right. Yeah. It's like basically like, what if a profiler was a serial killer? Like, you would know exactly what things to do to make them think certain things for the profile, right? Because that's what they base this stuff on.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that was pretty cool. And let's face it, it is a bad ending. There's no justice. There's been nothing about it. It's like, okay, we hope, this documentary will, flesh him out, right? Probably didn't happen. There's not, a Poughkeepsie Capes 2.
Yeah.
Right. And, I like that, it's true to the, this is a very common thing in found footage. It's true to the idea that this is a real thing, right? So they don't have, list of actors. They just have people in it, the characters' names. And, thanking for all these people. These people were involved, for the interviews and the processes and stuff like that. Was it a psychological thriller, true crime? Yeah, absolutely. Horror? Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to. The guy being very obsessed with Cheryl enough to have like 90% of his tapes dedicated to her. And I do like the fact that, he essentially moves and starts over again. And the idea is, you talk about the real life stuff. You have Jack the Ripper, which we never caught, the Zodiac Killer, which toyed with the cops on purpose. And he was able to toy with them, but not to the point where, haha, here's the clues you need to find me. It's like showing how smart I am and how many steps I am ahead of you guys. Good luck.
Yeah, and I think the big funny part about the Zodiac is that, those ciphers that he put out, where if you decipher this, you'll be able to find out who I am or whatever. I think they've broken the vast majority of them now. I mean, I know there was some that they just did recently, and they basically did it recently because they would they had to intentionally make mistakes.
Right.
Like, those ciphers were not perfect. That's why people can't decode them, is because he made mistakes while making them.
Right.
So, you can't decode them using any kind of system because he messed up his own system. That's why he's not as smart as he thinks he is.
Right.
Which is, I thought, is very funny. But
yeah. So, I mean, overall, I mean, like I said, for 2007, yes, Dateline was there. But obviously in the past couple of years, true crime has exploded in podcasts, in TV shows, especially on Netflix. And I think this is just kind of
it's been for a while. I'd say the last decade.
But, for me, I don't recall much as far as horror movies are concerned before this. So I know this is during your dark ages of horror movies, but I was watching stuff and I don't recall this being a big thing at this point in time. So was it a precursor to it? Maybe.
Yeah, no, again, at this time period, I was staying away from horror, and I was really staying away from found footage horror.
Yeah.
Simply because it was they were popping up like reality shows.
Yes.
It was everybody was popping up, everybody was making one because they're cheap and they're simple and they're most of them are not good.
Right. Yeah, but no, I think this was a good one. Well, what about your low points for this?
Low points. I mean, one is the VHS effects. There's way too many of them, and they're way overdone. So you can't go more than 5 seconds of any of these films without having tracking issues or weird, color bending issues and stuff like that. It's this guy obviously took care of his tapes and shit. Like these tapes would not be in this bad of shape. Like these tapes are being played like you found them in a fucking flood. You know what I mean? Like they look so bad. And there's every single one is like that, which again, I know they put those effects on there to make it seem like it's older or whatever. And that's fine. I mean, because it was obviously filmed in digital and then tuned through, analog stuff to like put the artifacts and things on them, and then like intentionally digitally put that stuff on there.
Right.
So yeah, I thought that was a little overdone. I mean, the whole fucking Cheryl thing is so goddamn depressing, dude. Jesus Christ. It's like you feel so bad for this. She's been tortured and messed with for years. And like they get her back and they have her back for a couple of years at least. Like, how is she not in an institution? You know what I mean? Like, if she still thinks that this guy is in love with her and she can't even think for herself enough to like do an interview, one, why the hell would she do the interview? And two, why the hell would her parents let her just live free without going to like serious therapy to like decode her?
Right.
Like I was just like, anyway, it was depressing, dude. it was upsetting, disturbing seeing all this horrible stuff happen to her, and then it was just depressing seeing that she's still stuck there.
Yeah. Like I said, I completely agree. Everything was kind of ramped up to 11, like the worst case scenario for everything.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, those were just depressing low points. I'm like, come on, man. Can something like decent happen? Can like she like feel like a normal person again? But no.
Right. Yeah. I mean, do you have any other low points?
Nope.
Okay. I mean, yeah, the Cheryl thing. Yeah, that was kind of the point of the movie, realistically, right? Was Cheryl, and them trying to catch this guy. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's clearly digitally made, and back then the VHS effects were harder to do, but now there's filters on your phones that you're able to do all this stuff now too. So, and that's always going to be the issue, I think, with found footage. Is as we get more and more advanced, we're going to see more stuff like this set realistically in the past.
So, I mean, it's real easy to do that. You just film it with those cameras. Those cameras are still around.
Yeah.
Just film it with those cameras. That way you get the effects. You don't have to put digital effects on shit. I don't know why people don't do that.
Right.
We have to film it with the newest stuff, but then we're going to put a filter on it to make it look old. So, like, why don't you just film it with old shit? So why don't you just make it easy on yourself?
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like I said, we do love bad endings, but there's a difference between like flat out depressing versus bad endings.
Right. Yeah. Bad ending is like, like a bad ending is like, oh, it's not really over. Like it's still happening. It's still going, like, or like, the bad guy got away, or, stuff like that. Right. But this is just fucking depressing to where, this woman is still living in that torture even after she's got out of it. It's depressing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all I got for low points.
Mm. All right. So what did you rate this movie? This time we're doing bad VHS effects because all of these movies have bad VHS effects on them. How many bad VHS effects out of 10 would you give this movie?
Oh, especially with the first time seeing this, and when I heard about this, I'm like, I don't know if the wife's gonna want to watch this one in particular, just because of Cheryl. So I didn't watch this one with her. But I mean, it was very interesting. Like it caught my attention like fully the entire way through. And for that, like I give it kudos. Like, yeah, we have bad VHS effects. That's very hard to watch sometimes. It's nauseating sometimes, and there were Girl Scouts that he actually let go, which was very surprising.
Yeah, I thought for sure that was going to be bad.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it for what this is for a found footage, I mean, it was pretty decent. It's something that I will probably easily watch again. So for that, I'm going to go 8 bad VHS effects out of 10.
Okay.
What about you?
I will give it, we'll say 6 bad VHS effects out of 10.
6.
6.
If it had less bad VHS effects, would it have been higher for you?
Yeah, if it had, less bad VHS effects, if like the Cheryl thing wasn't so fucking depressing. And yeah, I mean, like I said, overall, the idea and everything of it was good. I just thought presentation could have used a little more, but
Yeah,
not bad by any means.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is I think it's always going to be a common theme as we watch these found footage stuff is there's generally always bad endings. None of these end good because the house, why would it be found footage, essentially, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, we're also looking at, what's the template that they're all following, right?
Blair Witch.
Right, which is that had a bad ending, so that everybody thinks they have to have a bad ending. So
Yes.
Speaking of, our next movie it was released in the UK originally. The name in the UK was The Borderlands. When it got released here in the States, they called it Final Prayer.
Which I would argue that Final Prayer makes more sense of a title.
Right. Yeah, Borderlands, I don't know what that means. Maybe it means something in the UK and that's why they changed it for here. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know what the Borderlands would mean there. But yeah, Final Prayer, I guess, makes more sense. But I will let you take it away.
Yeah. So essentially, we are introduced to this is where do you think in UK, like Scotland?
It's not Scotland, but yeah, it's kind of rural England. Yeah,
maybe Welsh or more northern England.
Sure,
with old school. More farmland. I don't know how long it takes to get to farmland out of London.
Not that far, from what I understand. But.
Yeah. So we're introduced to kind of Greer. The IT guy.
Gray.
Yeah. Gray.
His name's Gray.
Yeah. And he's setting up the house, and for some reason, cameras everywhere. Oh, sorry. Before that. This takes in Brazil, they show a church being kind of opened up and like speaker wires and speakers and subwoofers being revealed in the walls, and like the police come in there, and essentially it looks like a debunking of something, right? Saying, hey, this was all fake. We don't know really what it says, and we meet the main guy by what his name is. I'm blanking on his name.
Which one?
The old guy.
Deacon.
That's right. Deacon, yes. So, they're like kind of like a ghost hunter type esque thing, but disproving and debunking everything. And we see Deacon is there. And then we cut then to Gray setting up the house, camera everywhere, setting up headset camera or cameras on his head and over his ear, which most people don't do because especially in ghost hunter films, because they always say, oh, I caught out the corner of my eye. Well, if we're seeing where you're looking, we're going to see that you saw nothing as well.
Right.
But anyway, he's like, hey, hey, Gray gets introduced to Deacon. He's like, hey, we have these cameras on. It's like, what if I go to the bathroom? Oh, not when you do number 2 or take a shower, take it off. Oh, why? Oh, we're sharing a room? That's weird. Well, this belongs to Mark. He's not here yet. And then they go to a church. And they're kind of watching footage of a baptism where the priest is baptizing. All of a sudden, his nose starts bleeding and chalices and stuff falls off of the ceremonial altar. I don't remember what it's called in the middle there. I think it's just an altar.
Yeah, it's just an altar. Yeah, so the stuff, candles and the crucifix moves on the altar, and there's like a bunch of sounds that happen, and then his nose bleeds and everything, and they're like, so like they're like, it looks convincing. Like the people are convinced that it's real, or not necessarily real, but looks
the parishioners,
legit. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Gray's like, oh, he can't fake all this stuff, and Deacon and him go there talking to him. He's like, oh, I thought you guys would be different dressed, better dressed than me. And they're going to come over. He's like, yeah, you could put a speaker here, you can do all this stuff, and they were kind of watching the footage with him, and starting to get like the church records because this is clearly a very old church, and the priest had only been there for a couple months. And we get more backstory that they're there to debunk or prove acts of miracles from the Catholic Church.
The Vatican itself.
The Vatican,
right.
Yeah, the Vatican itself.
Right. And the funny thing is there are actually teams like this.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
there's so many places that claim miracles. I mean, some of them are like long term, like they've been claiming them for years. Some of them are like new. Like every time somebody says like Jesus is in my toast, they have to send people out to like verify it or whatever. And like Deacon says, like 99% of these are all faked. They're all hoaxes. They're like things that people intentionally do. Like they found the speakers in the wall. Like there was a famous one I remember of like a statue that would cry blood.
Yes.
And yeah, they had to like crack open the statue and they found tubes. Like there was somebody like underneath the building in a crawl space that was not on any architecture or plan they didn't know existed. He was under there like pumping the blood.
Right. And and Gray clearly wants to find proof of something, and Deacon's just so jaded from it all. He's like, no, this is not how it goes. This is clearly the shots of the altar, the chalices were different behind the priest versus what the footage showed. They talk about the girl that had stigmata. She's like, yeah. Turns out that the mother was punching holes in her for weeks to the point where she died and tried to declare her a saint, which I thought you had to have at least 3 miraculous acts to be declared a saint in the Catholic Church, not just stigmata.
Not necessarily. No, you just basically have to be, because saints can't do anything bad.
Right.
So basically, like that's where the term devil's advocate comes from, is when somebody's trying to be called a saint, they literally have someone make the case for their sainthood, and then you have someone that they call the devil's advocate that goes out and tries to find anything bad about that person. That person, like as far as you remember Mother Teresa?
Yeah, they're trying to find proofs of miracles for her. Yeah.
They've pretty much halted the investigation because they know there's way too many bad things that she's done to be a saint. So they're just kind of leaving it in limbo because they don't want to besmirch her name because everybody still knows her as like, oh, the great Mother Teresa. They don't want to like ruin it. But yeah, like apparently she was involved in like prostitution and stuff, like not great stuff.
Right.
But essentially that's what they're doing.
Yeah. And, so they get all the stuff. They go back to the house. They find Father Mark. He's like, hey, why'd you go there? Why are you doing all this stuff? He's like, you're not supposed to do this without the entire team. What are they going to find out when there's a non-believer being Gray, but he believes in the supernatural. He desperately wants to find it. They have a little back. Mark and Deacon have little things like, oh, this can't be like, whoever this was in the past. We have to do everything by the book. We have to have, no lapses in footage.
Well, I think when he said non-believer, he was poking at Deacon.
He was, but Gray thought it meant himself.
Well, Gray did, yeah. But like he was poking fun at Deacon because Deacon, has obviously been doing this for a long time and is very jaded about the whole thing, because after you see so many fake miracles, it's hard to believe that there could be a real one.
Right. And I don't understand how weird noises, altar shaking, and nosebleeds would be a good miracle, but whatever. I don't know. Well, any kind of unexplained thing happening in a church, I guess, would be considered a miracle or something. Right.
I don't know.
So yeah, anyway, they're discussing it, and I think they're all eating fish and chips because it's UK.
Yep.
Also, to me, it sounded like a woman screaming initially on the outside the house. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah, that's funny because that's traditionally what they say is that sheeps, when they scream, sound like children or women screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they go like, "Oh, someone's screaming," and nope, a lamb is set on fire.
Yeah.
And they somehow put it out, and then Deacon's like, "Oh, it's still alive. Let's."
Yeah, which is a mercy. Yes.
Right. Greg's clearly disturbed by this because right.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely true. Yeah. So anyway, that happens. Next day they go to the church and they're going to set of cameras. They are, looking for anything that could be even as small as earbuds in the walls to help start debunking everything there. They are, like I said, just proving for anything. Like I said, wires, speakers, all this stuff, trying to figure out how the altar would have moved. Look under it. And it's like, hey, there was a carve out here that could have been for a subwoofer.
And the one thing that annoyed the shit out of me at this part, right, is that, like, where the bookshelf is,
yes,
very clearly a door.
Yes.
Immediately you look at it and you're like, that's a secret door. I mean, it does not take a genius to figure that out. And they never look behind it, even though they're supposedly, like, quote unquote, looking everywhere. Somehow they never look there.
Yes.
And it's just so annoying. I'm like, yeah, of course these guys don't find anything because they're very, like, not efficient.
Yeah, I mean, that I agree. You immediately knew, like, okay, like, it's like video game logic even too.
Right. I'm like, looking, I'm like, there's a door there. I can clearly see the door.
Yes. So anyway, they're doing all this stuff and they start, I think Father Mark starts getting like an ear bleed from some disturbance. He's kind of like looking at different holes of things. Anyway, then they set up a microphone or what's that machine even called? So it's an old radio that's able to pick up different frequencies and things between the frequencies.
Yeah, but I don't know. The way they were using this thing makes me feel like the person who wrote this does not understand how sound works.
Right.
Because, okay, here's what they were saying, right? Like, they set up, like, whatever, we'll say 10 microphones, right?
Yeah.
And now what they're saying is, like, okay, now on this dial, right, which is an analog machine. They made very clear to say it's an analog machine that can go between the frequencies. Now on this thing, like, frequency 100 is one microphone, 200 is the second microphone, so on and so forth, all the way to 1,000 is the 10th one.
Yes.
Like, okay. And then they're like, and we'll crank between them. Like, what is that going to accomplish? They were somehow trying to say that they could pinpoint the location where sound was coming from in a 3-dimensional space by doing this.
Yes.
I don't know if you can do that. I mean, there are ways to do that, but not the way that they're describing. Because, correct. I mean, you could do it by triangulating it. If you would have to have microphones listening, and then you would say, okay, this is, whatever, 1 inch from this microphone, 2 inches from this microphone, 3 inches from that microphone. You can pinpoint where it came from. And I understand you could do it in this situation. I'm just saying the way that they talked about it and described it did not make any sense.
Correct.
Anyway, yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
For the sake of the story, I understand why they did it. I'm just saying, like, if you haven't even, like, a cursory knowledge, like, I'm not a sound engineer, but I have, like, a cursory knowledge of how sound functions in a 3-dimensional space, and, like, I know for a fact that the way that they're describing it is not the way that it would really be detected. I guess right. from a whatever storytelling aspect, it makes sense to do it that way, but I don't know, to me it was annoying.
Yeah. So anyway, between the frequencies, they hear baby crying, they hear deep growls, wind howling, and they're trying to pinpoint this stuff. Like, oh, it's over here. Oh, it's over here. Oh, it's coming from here. They see the priest of the church kind of pass by the window. Like, oh, he's out here. He's clearly doing this. Right, he's setting up this stuff. We're trying to find the stuff. They kind of, find him. Oh, he's here. No, he's not here. We're proving it. And Father Mark kind of following him is like, hey, we know this is fake. He's like, oh, you don't believe my miracle. And then he climbs the bell tower, and the lead priest of the church is there. He's like, oh, you don't believe my miracles. How can it not be a miracle? and he looks away briefly, and then he jumps to his death.
Right. Like, okay. Like, how thin is your logic to be like, they haven't even finished their investigation yet, and you kill yourself?
Yeah.
Like, that looks extremely suspicious. Like,
Right.
I would be, when Mark was saying, yeah, this is done, we're leaving now, I completely understood. Even though Mark was supposed to be the jerk of the movie, right?
Right.
I completely understood. He was like, this is obviously a fake. Like, we came here, as we're, like, checking out these sounds and shit like that, the dude is obviously creeping through the window, whether he's doing it or whether he's making sure we find what he wants us to find. Like, this is obviously his thing. Like, he's trying to, like, you know, his congregation consists of what, like 2 people.
Yeah.
So he's like very clearly trying to like make a name for himself to get more people to come to this church. And then when he basically, by overhearing their conversation, learns that they don't really believe that this is true, immediately kills himself. Yeah, I was totally on Mark's side. Like, yeah, pack it up, let's go.
Right.
Like,
They're like,
this
well,
is stupid.
Like, that's the biggest sin of all. Yeah, it is. They said that, like, as a Catholic, killing yourself in that state, that's straight to hell. And why would he do that? Clearly, you know, the priest was disturbed because we see him entering the church and, like, praying weirdly, who knows what hour of the night, and trying to talk to someone and really trying to find his miracle.
Right.
So more like paranormal-ish type stuff than, like, I would say a Christian miracle would be. More of like ghost hunting and possession or stuff like that. Stuff was really going on inside that church. But yeah, Mark's like, okay, we're done. Take off the cameras. We're packing up. We're going. Gray and Deacon go to the local pub because Deacon is an alcoholic because he's that jaded and had bad stuff, which we don't know about yet. They're like, oh, pub's closed. Like, it's not even night yet. Oh, well, a guy just died. You know, he went to school with him.
You can't leave out the best part of the movie.
When he punches the kid?
Yeah, the kid, like, they're walking past a group of kids, and the one kid starts going like, bah, bah, like, obviously trying to like make a joke, like, hey, we burned the sheep in front of your house. And he walks up and punches the kid in the face as hard as he can. And he goes down on the ground unconscious.
Yes.
It's by far the best part of it.
Which, you know, ties in briefly to the hoodlums of England. But yeah, okay. They're disturbed if they literally went there to mess with them and set a lamb on fire.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, where are the fucking police? Like, why wouldn't people be like set a fucking sheep on fire? Like, that's messed up shit, dude.
Yeah.
Like, somebody should be fucking, you know, convicted or punished for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you know, they're like, hey, discussing, you know, folklore in the pub. We don't like you. You cause us to our priest. Get out of here. They get kicked out. Deacon clearly can't sleep because he's so drunk and disturbed, and you know, he's like, oh, don't tell Mark I punched the kid. I'm like, I would tell everyone.
Yeah, I was like, why not? There's a fucking kid, like, you know, straight up like killed a sheep in a horrifying manner.
Yes.
It's the least he deserved.
Yeah. So anyway, he's like, okay, you know what? I'm going back to the church because he found like a pagan symbol. They're talking about all the stuff, like in this old diary, the symbols there. They found the symbol on the church. Goes there, and the church is now graffitied, which is very odd. Clearly, the hoodlums went into the church.
That was there the whole time.
Was it?
Yeah. Like, the very first time that they go in there and they see him preaching to like his 2 people in there, that graffiti is already there.
But they made point of it because he kicks the aerosol can when he goes.
No, that's a beer can.
Oh, okay.
It was a beer can that fell off of the thing. So kids were in there like drinking and screwing around.
Yeah.
They might have sprayed more. I'm just saying the graffiti on the very back of that back like pew in there, that was there from the beginning.
Huh.
Which is why, like, I don't know why, like, that's the easiest thing you could do is clean off the paint.
Yes.
Like, why wouldn't that have been done before people were brought into the church? Like, what the hell is this guy doing in his free time?
Right. It just seemed more obvious to me. That's why I missed it then. Yeah, but anyway, he goes there, and what is this where he finds He goes through the clearly bookshelf.
Right, yeah. He goes to the books and builds the bookshelf. I'm like, thank you. Like, I knew that was a freaking door the whole time.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, he pulls it all back there, and there's like a secret door, and he goes in there, and he hears the dead father who killed himself, screaming down there.
Right, and more baby crying and stuff like that. But he's
Right.
like, all right. He's like, and dead animals. He's like, okay, I'm getting out.
Right.
Which I'm gonna throw this out right now. It may be a little point. If they were told to pack up, they still had cameras inside that church.
Well, he said we're packing it up and we're leaving, but it was at night. So like, I don't think he said they're gonna do it then. I think he meant like, this is it. We're gonna be leaving tomorrow.
Well, I just assumed that because in their living room of the house they're renting, all the equipment was packed up and sorted out and stacked, ready to go.
Well, yeah, but I think he was starting to do the process of doing it. But yeah, I mean, like taking the cameras down would be like the last thing you do before you left.
Right.
Yeah, and they just haven't gotten it. He was probably going to do that first thing the next morning.
Yeah. So anyway, find all the stuff. Deacon calls his old mentor. Like, oh, we have two priests. We need an older priest to come.
Right.
To like, hey, we found all this stuff. Like, what you are the knowledge expert of this. What do you think? He wasn't, Deacon didn't tell Mark about it. Mark was clearly upset. They get the old priests and start describing this stuff, going over the pagan symbols. Like, hey, as we discussed in our Rawhead Rex thing, is Christians built churches on top of pagan sites to help convert them. Absolutely true.
Yeah. So the pagans showed up. They're like, hey, where's my pagan church? They're like, oh, well, this is a new church in the same place as your pagan church. Just come on in.
Right.
Yeah, that's essentially what they did.
Oh, absolutely true. Absolutely happened. It's just what it was. And somehow they found it's like they used LiDAR on the church, like found this old pagan symbol of where the church was. I'm like, if this church has been there for hundreds of years, how do they have an aerial picture of the grounds before the church was built?
I don't know if that was no. I think it was. I think the church was supposed to be there. They were just like looking at the land around it.
Okay.
So I don't know.
I'm trying to like, did they use LiDAR like to get rid of the building and just see the ground there to see that symbol that was over the entire thing? I don't know.
Or maybe it could be. It's like the those big like drawing things in the desert, like in South America, wherever it is. Like when you're on the ground, you can't see it because it's too big. But if you look at it from above, you can see that it's very clearly a symbol because you're so high up. You get that 10,000 foot view, right?
The Mesquite lines or something like that.
Yeah, whatever. They're just designs that they drew in the desert, but you can't. When you're down there, you can't see it because it's too big for you. Maybe it was something like that. Like the symbol was like big, you can only see it from above or something. Okay. I just assumed that. I didn't look too close at the pictures.
Yeah, but they're talking about the symbol. They see the symbol everywhere, which has always been there. Talking like, oh, they worshipped some unknown deity, and we, as the Christian church, would go, oh, your deity is now a demon. It's the Antichrist. It's something evil versus something that you worship. So it's just another conversion path. And the idea of a lot of the Christian demons was old stuff that the pagans would worship. And that's how they converted people. There was a conversation between Gray and Deacon, but pagans worship the sun, the moon, the earth, versus things that you can physically see, versus things that you can't, being the Christian God. If I had a bet who's going to win in the fight, something that doesn't exist for something that does, that's what I'm going with. So anyway, they bring the old priest there. He starts doing a cleansing ritual. Deacons talking, there's Latin that they heard, and something about the devil's eyes or someone's eyes. Frederick.
Well, that was when they listened to the recording of when Deacon went in there alone. Right. It was like, Fellini or Fellerini's eyes or Fellazzini's eyes.
Calvino's?
No, Calvino was the name, but that was the name of the old priest that was there.
Yeah.
But the Fellazzini was, when he told the story earlier in the movie, when he was talking about how he went to the one place on another miracle hunt.
In Germany, yeah.
Well, it was in South America somewhere. And they basically said that, the people there said they saw God. And then the cardinal, who's like, the very high ranking dude, went there himself. And then he saw God too. And then, but when he told the story to Gray earlier, when he got there, everybody was already dead. And then when they retell the story later and you hear it from Mark, you find out that when he got there, they were still alive. And essentially what it boiled down to is they took the local native people had drugged them with a bunch of like GMT or something.
Yeah.
Like whatever it was, a whole bunch of fucking drugs, which is very easy for them to hallucinate. They were hallucinogenic drugs that they took. And so basically that they figured out that they were going to get caught and they panicked and killed the priests. And then they hid their bodies in the forest. Now, and again, Deacon told the story earlier. He got there after they were already dead. And then he found out it would happen through an autopsy. Now, the real story is when he got there, they were still alive. He was just out drinking that night and wasn't with them. So when they went and saw God by getting drugged, he was in a bar drunk. So they killed the rest of the priests. He didn't get killed because he was drinking.
Yes.
And so that the Felazzini was the guy that was one of the head priest that was in that group that he wasn't a part of. So basically that priest was saying something that he should not have known. Well, one, he's fucking dead already. And two, he's saying something about something he should not have known that was personal to the person that was listening there.
Yeah.
So they basically just saying there's more going on here.
Right. So anyway, they have Mark and Deacon have this huge outburst, like you don't even believe you're questioning your faith all the time. We don't need this old rituals anymore. You guys are old. We have to do this new, and realize that there's not really miracles. I still part of the church, but I am the new wave of belief. You guys are the old way. You make way for the future, essentially. Big, like almost earthquake, stuff starts, falling. All of a sudden, like Mark and the old priest are gone.
Well, Mark was on the ground, like he had
seemingly killed.
Well, he wasn't killed. He had bloods coming out of his ears, and he was like unconscious, but he was still alive. But he was not looking good.
No.
But then, like we see him, and then he's like looking for Deacon, and then he goes back, and Mark is gone.
Right.
Like the old priest was gone the whole time. He just disappeared.
Yeah. So then, Gray and Deacon go into the tunnel and start going further and further. The ears pop. They're so far underground, and they seem to be hearing Mark and the old priest, and they're following him through very narrow tunnels. They see sacrifices of children. They see animals. Like, oh, this is bad. They killed children. And essentially reminds me of like as above, so below. Like the farther they get, the deeper they got, the worse things got. They got closer to hell, essentially.
Well, it's like every found footage movie in this era is the same thing.
Right. And the way that they get through there, I wouldn't squeeze through that crap that they did. I'm out.
Yeah. Again, like, okay, these like amateur caver people.
Yeah.
This is one of my low points. I'll just say it now. I don't understand. Like, why would you do something that like requires you to wiggle through shit? Like any kind of like shift in the earth or anything happens, or like water comes in there, like you are dead.
Yep.
There is no way out of that. Again, I don't know. I'm not claustrophobic, but I just like, there's no way in hell I would do that. No way in hell. And they do it like 3 times.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, this is stupid, guys.
I'll be like, no, I'm out. See ya. We're going to call cops. And It's not a problem. But eventually they get into the place and like, oh, this isn't stone anymore. It's squishy. It smells bad. And turns out, they try to turn around. Oh, their path is closed. And, well, they're being eaten alive in the digestive tract. And stomach acid is eating away at them. And basically dead.
Right.
End of movie.
Right. And I want to know, this is a side question. What the hell kind of equipment were they using? Like, obviously it wasn't, the recordings weren't being stored on the unit on themselves. They were somehow being transmitted somewhere else, right?
Yes.
Like, where the hell were they being transmitted to?
They
did like come out and say like he stuck a relay on the wall and he's like, oh, this is a relay so that our, equipment can still talk to this stuff upstairs. At least they thought that far ahead.
Right.
That he was doing that as they were moving along. But like, like how would it have recorded all the stuff that was happening down there? Like on what? What exactly would have held all that footage?
It's a great question.
Whatever. I was just like, it's just a side thing of like, where the hell is it going?
Yeah. So I'll go into my, I said first thoughts on this. The end was spoiled for me because I actually saw this movie on the list a couple weeks ago. And I wish had I known at that point in time we were going to be doing this, I'm like, oh man, I wouldn't have watched it. Maybe I should stop watching stuff that gives away, twists to movies before I watch them.
Oh yeah, that's that's why I don't do that.
Yeah. So, it is very found footage, ish, and very Ghost Hunters-esque as well. But it's very I'd say very trope-ish away a bit in this movie, of especially when you have priests involved. One's always jaded and is losing its faith. One comes in that's very old school versus new school. I'd say this movie was just trope-ish in that aspect. Do I like the stuff about the paganism and stuff like that, and the conversion that happened? Yeah, I mean, we discussed that in Rawhead Rex. It happened, and it's very interesting to see, and hear about and learn about the changes that were done to convert people and force them to think that their old ways are evil and wrong and everything like that.
Yeah, I think it's very convenient that, like, the pagan stuff that the Vatican is experiencing would just happen to be evil. Right. Like the vast majority of anything that pagans worship is simply just forces of nature.
Right. Yeah. And, I how I am with lore sometimes. I wish we got more information, like, what did they enter? Clearly that's the entity that they were worshiping, but what was it? You know what I mean? Not really explained at all. Like, what did they crawl into?
Well, I think it was like a giant, like, sandworm or something.
Something like that.
If you look at the pagan symbol of it, it looks kind of like a big circle mouth with like 3 big teeth on it.
Yeah.
So I assumed that was like some kind of just like orifice that they were throwing their sacrifices into.
Something like that.
And so essentially, because this thing wasn't getting its sacrifices that it wanted, and like, I think the crying baby woke it up. You know what I mean? Like, nothing has been in that church for a very long time, so that the entity, whatever it was asleep.
Right.
And then when the baby was crying, it woke it up, because they used to sacrifice babies to it. So babies crying is probably like the thing, like salivating, like, I need me some baby meat, So I think that's what that's why the miracle thing happened when the baby was crying, is because the thing was waking up. And then after that, it was like trying to like mind control that priest to try to get him what he wanted. Because if like the old diary that they were reading, that was the same thing that happened. That guy was the priest of that church that eventually got taken over. And at the very end, he was like, I serve a new master now. And it was the symbol of that God.
Right.
So, and then, and then he said, like, he started an orphanage in town, and that orphanage's whole purpose was to get children for the thing to eat.
Yes.
So that's essentially, he's trying to start that process over again. And the baby crying woke him up, made him hungry. And so he took basically the best thing he could get, which was these guys that could easily be led down there, with their, I don't know, I guess either they were possessed or dead ghosts, right? The 2 other priests, they were probably just dead, and he probably just manipulated them into thinking they were alive.
Right.
And then dragged them down, and they walked right into its mouth.
Yeah.
Because instead, that's what they used to do with the babies. I'm sure they just went down there and put them in a certain hole, and that fell down and went right into his mouth. And so now he convinced them to walk into his mouth, and so now he gets to eat. I mean, he probably prefers baby, but he'll take whatever he can get.
Which is interesting to think that he spits out the bones or something. Because to have all those skeletons there, he'd have to spit out the bones.
Well, yeah, essentially, I think it's just like an acid that eats away the flesh, and then he just pukes back up the bones. Is probably what it is.
So it's a sarlacc. Got it.
Yes, yeah, something like that. That was what I assumed.
Yeah.
I mean, the bones probably wouldn't come out in perfect, like, shape like that, they'd be all just a big pile. But
Yeah.
I mean, again, a big pile of bones is not as, interesting to look at as like a whole baby skeleton.
Yeah. So, I mean, what were your first thoughts on this?
I mean, yeah, it's basically, like it's very convenient that the one pagan thing that they're looking at just happens to be evil. When,
Right.
Like, again, the vast majority of them were like, they worship like wind or fire or the sun, or whatever it is, like just basic, nature shit.
Right.
And now, like, of course, it was like the one place that had some like, mystical, otherworldly entity, which is whatever. But it was all right. I mean, it was good. I mean, as for being as Christian heavy as it was, obviously this is like a Vatican research team. Like they did a pretty good job, I think, of at least putting other viewpoints in there. Like the one guy was talking about, hey, I'm going to bet on something that exists or something that doesn't exist. I'm going to bet on the things that exist. I mean, again, it's just interesting that they put that in there. You know what I mean? Like they're trying to balance it out.
Right.
I like that they had, like the guy that questions his faith, and it looked like he went to like what, Hinduism or Buddhism or something.
Something like that,
I think he had a little Buddha. I don't know. It was a little bitty statue. It was hard to tell. It was either Buddha or Ganesh. I couldn't tell which one it was. It was a little pudgy guy. I couldn't see the face too well. So like I said, it was either Buddha or Ganesh. He was like burning incense. Yeah. So like obviously, he's like questioning his faith enough to like start putting his faith in other things. The techie guy really wasn't a believer at all. He was like, his mind was open to like, if I see something, I'll believe it. But like, I don't believe in the church kind of thing. And then Mark, I don't think Mark really believed either. He was just all about business. He was getting in and he was doing his thing. It doesn't, I guess in that mind, it doesn't matter if he believes or not. He's there to do a job.
Right.
So like nobody was there like looking for like the true Jesus's face kind of thing. I guess the father of that church was.
Yeah.
And then when he realized they weren't that, he like killed himself. But again, I don't blame Mark at all for going, yep, we're packing it up, we're out of here. Like this guy like blatantly trying to like, fake a miracle to get people to come to his shitty church.
Right.
Well, again, like I'm sure because they've seen this 100 times, they know what it is. That's why he says pack it up. And for whatever reason, Deacon didn't. I mean, probably because he was drunk. He just wanted to see if there was something else there, or maybe he finally remembered. Oh yeah, we never looked behind a book.
Yeah.
Something I don't know. Whatever it was, but I mean it's all right. Yeah, I don't. That was my first impression anyway. But
why don't you roll into your highlights then?
Okay. Let's see. High points. I like the concept of it. I mean, like the whole, like the reason it's found footage is because, they're filming everything because they don't want anybody to be able to naysay anything that they found.
Right.
Because there will be literally everything will be recorded from start to finish. Like everything is there, all time stamped and everything. So you can't say, oh, what about this 5 minutes here? You could have easily done something to, move it around or whatever. So that's why they do that. A lot of these found footages, they don't even bother explaining why everybody has a camera.
Right.
I mean, sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't even bother. It's just like, yep, everybody's got a camera. Like, yeah, and everybody keeps it on the whole time for reasons that are not set.
Running for your life. But
right.
Keep the camera going.
Right. Yeah. They don't explain why. This one at least explains why. And I mean, I like that. I mean, like the ending was interesting. you don't often, yeah. I didn't expect it at all. I mean, they were going through that little thing. I'm like, again, what is with you guys going through these little tiny openings? And then like when he said, oh, it's blocked back here too, I was like, oh, they're just going to trap him and like just let him die in there. That's goofy. But then, I was like, then the walls started squishing out and like, dripping acid. I was like, oh, they're in somebody's belly.
Yes, they are.
But yeah, no, it was an interesting concept. I mean, new at least. I haven't seen somebody, realize they're in somebody's gullet later on. But I mean, again, the whole presentation of it was interesting. I thought it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a bigger twist than anything in Night Shyamalan.
Well, yeah, it doesn't take much.
I know. No, I mean, I agree. You're supposed to hate Mark. I think we're supposed to be, we were supposed to be gray as the audience, right? But he was so desperate to find something real that he just didn't believe that things could be easily faked. He was the counterpoint to Deacon in a way. He's like, oh, everything's real. And Deacon's like, no, nothing's real. Like, this is it. I've seen so much bad.
Right. And the funny
people trying to exploit people.
Yeah, the funny part is right in the very, very, very beginning, if he was paying attention, he would have very clearly seen that there was evidence that something was going on there.
Yeah. And
that was that gravesite. Like, he was sitting there, he was rolling up, because for some reason he rolled his own cigarettes, even though it's 2010 or whatever the hell it was.
Right.
He's rolling his own cigarettes. But yeah, he's sitting there rolling his own cigarettes, and you see a tombstone he walks in front of, and it says his name, Gray Parker, with his birth date and that year as I think it was 2013, right? I think that's
2013. Yeah.
And it was 2013 as the death date. Very clearly said his name, and he looks up, looks away, and he looks back, and then it changed back to what it was. It was like, Grace Parks, which is like she died in the 1800s or something. So like, it very clearly had evidence, if he would have been paying attention, that something different happened there.
Yes.
So, I mean, they could have explained that away in one way, sure. But if he was looking for something, he didn't do anything, right?
Right.
So.
No, I mean, like I said, this was it good and interesting? Yeah, I think this movie was quite interesting. Was it very tropish? Yeah, because now I think a very standard trope is people going, "Oh, I'm investigating this stuff. I don't believe anything to be real," and it turns out to be real.
Well, yeah, but if you made a movie about three priests that are all super gung ho Jesus, and they find a miracle, like, nobody's gonna watch that. You know what I mean? I mean, you're gonna show it in a church or whatever. Like, those very hardcore Christian folks will watch it, but that's it.
Right.
And a Christian audience, it's a very niche audience, but you're not gonna make blockbuster money with that.
Yeah.
So that's why they always have somebody that doesn't believe in there. That way, everybody can feel connected in some way.
Right, and I agree with you for the most part. They did explain a lot of reasons for a lot of things they did. Which is nice. They, as you said, they don't generally say why is everyone have the camera on, why is all this stuff.
Right. Well, yeah, they don't say like, how the hell is it still able to transmit that far underground? And again, he's like, the guy was like, oh, I'm putting these relays in, so like, he very clearly thought ahead, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Very rarely do that.
Right. What about low points for you?
Low points, number one, the fucking sheep, dude.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Who would do that? That's horrible. I mean, if nothing else, then for the horrible sound. What are you thinking?
Right.
But yeah, it was bad. And then again, like, the kid came out saying "ba ba." Like, I would have like arrest this fucking kid. Like, he's a serial killer in the making. Like, you need to do something now. But I mean, punching that kid is like, it's the least thing you deserve, man.
Right.
Little jerk. Okay, the amateur caving thing, which I already talked about. Like, if I gotta squeeze through some shit, nope. I am out. Like, there's no way. Like, I read the Nutty Putty cave story. It scares the shit out of me. I would never ever do that. Have you ever heard that story?
No.
It's okay. It's horrifying. And I'll give you the gist of it. I'm not going to give you the whole story, but it's basically a guy. It was like an amateur caver guy, right? Mm-hmm. There's like this cave that's I think it was like even labeled like intermediate skill. Like, it's not that bad. But anyway, it's like one of those caves you got to like squeeze through. And essentially, he kind of got lost, and he went into a section of the caves that he wasn't supposed to go into. And he wiggled into this section and then realized he couldn't get out. It was getting too small. He couldn't go forward, and he also couldn't back up. And he was stuck. And he was stuck upside down. And awesome. So they were like, he's like, oh shit, I'm stuck. And so the people he was with, thankfully, they went back and they were like, yeah, the guy's stuck. We can't get him out, because they couldn't pull him out. So what they did is they went and they got like a professional rescue team. And they set up like a series of pulleys and ropes and shit to get him out, right?
Yeah.
And they finally tied him all up, and they got him all hooked up and everything. And they were pulling him out, and the fucking rope snapped. And he fell even deeper in. And then basically he was only conscious for like, I think maybe 10 minutes after that. And then he went unconscious and he died in there.
Wow.
And they couldn't get him out after the rope snapped. They could not like get him out of there. And he just died in there. So, I mean, like that knowing that story, I mean, I wouldn't have done it before that story, but like even hearing that story, that guy was like an experienced caver and he just made a wrong turn. He made a mistake and he died in there because of it.
Yeah.
So to me, any kind of like squeezing through a little opening like that, I mean, if it's like in a man-made building, like, okay, because it's leading somewhere, right? But like if I'm in a natural cave system, no way. No way would I ever do that. There's no possible way. Anyway, sorry. And the other thing that annoyed the shit out of me in this movie, it's a lot of movies are guilty of this, but this one was just like very noticeable, is the whole like mumble, mumble, mumble. I can't hear what these people are fucking saying. I have to turn up the sound to hear it. And as soon as I turn up the sound to hear it, boom, like some loud ass crash happens, like literally loud enough to wake the dog up, where he's looking at like, what the hell happened? And I was like, Jesus. So then you turn it all the way down, mumble, 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 can't hear, turn it up, crash, the crucifix is falling off the wall. And it's like, the dog is waking up, me like, what is going on with you, dude? I'm like, I don't know. The stupid movie keeps doing this to me back and forth. But yeah, it did that a lot of times where it was like just they're talking real low and they're like mumbling and they have accents. I can understand the accent, but like, you know, you have to have a volume to like hear it. So I have to keep turning it up, and then there's like they have these loud ass noises for no reason. Yeah, it was just a very great example of that. A lot of movies are guilty of it, but this one was, I think, especially guilty.
Yeah.
And that's it. What about you?
Oh yeah, the caving thing. Like when I went to the caves on vacation a couple months ago, you know, I'm like, oh, you could do it like natural caving for hours. We have to squeeze through things. Like, oh, you can't have a measurement over, I think this is like 36 inches. I'm like, okay, well that's not me,
one.
but...
I'm not. Yeah, there's no way my fat ass is gonna fit through there. But like two, even if I could, there's no way. There's no way.
Right.
My luck, I would get stuck in there, and then it would start raining, and then I would drown in there.
All right. But no, I just like, all right, if you get that deep and you like you have to start squeezing stuff, I'm like, all right, no, I'm out. It's just we'll come back for you, man. But you already thought he was dead anyway,
right?
And you know, as you discussed, sound engineering. We're not sound engineers, but we know enough to be dangerous, and we know that like of all the tech that they did, that stupid radio made zero sense.
Right. I'm just like, okay, like you could make this work. Again, I understand triangulation. I understand how that would work. Yes, you could, with this setup, you could make it work. But the way that they were trying to show it to the audience made no sense to me.
Correct.
I'm just like, I don't understand what that means. They should have been like, literally had like a little chart. And we're like, okay, it's, you know, whatever, a foot away from this one, 3 foot. Well, sorry, this is in the UK. 1 meter away from this one, 2 meters away from this one, you know, 3 meters away from this one. Okay, I intersect those. That's the point. This is where it came from. You know, like that, they could absolutely do that. But like somehow going, you know, going in between the frequencies. I was like, what is that supposed to show us? How would we know exactly what plane of, like the fourth plane, where would that be? You know what I mean? How do you know 3D from a number? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. And that's what was weird, just because they explained the tech for everything else except that.
No, and they explained that the science, it just didn't make any sense. I was like, that's not true.
Right. So no, that was pretty much low points for me.
All right. So how many bad VHS effects out of 10 would you give this movie?
You know, for despite what we said about it, it's still a really interesting movie to me. And you know, the concept was really well done. Like I said, I like that historic part of it and the some truth behind, you know, the idea of the Christianity conversion of paganism and stuff like that. Is it tropish? Yes, but is it a solid watch for me? I'd say so. So I'm probably going to give it 7.5 bad VHS effects out of 10. How about you?
Yeah, again, yeah, it's not a bad movie.
No.
I don't think it was quite as good as the Poughkeepsie tapes. I think probably because the subject matter was more interesting to me in the Poughkeepsie tapes.
Right.
But I would say it's right about this. It's right on par with it. So yeah, I'd go like 5.75 bad VHS effects out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, we both agree it's slightly not as good as Poughkeepsie tapes.
Yeah,
but still solid.
But still
Still
decent.
solid.
Yeah, it's still a decent. Like if you're looking for a found footage movie, this will do it.
With a great twist.
Yeah, just don't watch it in a house where people are sleeping, because you'll have to turn it up to. I mean, the accents aren't bad, but you have to turn it up a little bit to hear it, and then like as you're like random noises are like 10 times as loud as the voices.
Yeah.
So just watch your hearing. If you're using headphones, I don't know what to tell you. Make sure you got like a decibel plug or something.
There you go.
Okay, and that brings us to our third and final movie, Butterfly Kisses. I don't know what year this movie came out in, but
2018.
2018. That's pretty close.
Yeah.
So I'll start. I'll roll right into it here. So, essentially, we start off finding there's like this house that like these there's a guy and his wife, and then the wife's parents bought a new house that they were going to retire into. And then when they were like looking through the furnace area, they found a box of old tapes like stuffed under the furnace.
Right.
And they bring it out and they open it up, and it's like a bunch of like old, what do they call them? DV tapes? I don't know what they are. The little mini tapes.
Right.
They're not digital. They're little mini tapes, but they were like the very end of tapes. The little bitty ones. Anyway,
where you had to have the special converter to play it into your VCR.
Right. Yeah. But the camera was smaller because the tapes were little.
Right.
So they basically found that, and they didn't know what to do with it, but they knew that their son-in-law was he was a film student that makes wedding videos. So they knew, like, oh, he's a film person. Like, maybe he can like use these tapes, to like
reuse them. Yeah.
They thought they were gonna like retape over them, or maybe he can do something with them or watch them, whatever, or at least see what's on them, whatever it was. So this guy, whose name is Gavin, that's the son-in-law. He's the one that's kind of running this whole thing. He basically decides that he's going to take what he finds on this and make and kind of make his own version of the movie. Because what it is these tapes show another film student 10 years earlier that was essentially trying to find the truth about a local kind of urban legend of Peeping Tom, is what the
Blink Man.
Or the Blink Man. Yeah, the bunch of stupid names. But I'm going Peeping Tom.
Yes.
So Peeping Tom is this like entity that there's like this train bridge in their town. That if you go to this train bridge at night and start watching through the tunnel all the way to the other end of the tunnel, you have to watch through that tunnel between midnight and 1 a.m. without blinking.
An hour without blinking.
Yeah, an hour without. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. But anyway, so they're like, if you do that for a whole hour, then this thing is supposed to appear. And I don't know why anyone would want to do this, because they very clearly knew from the beginning, like, there's no way to get rid of it.
Right.
Like, everyone that they've said has ever been exposed to it dies. So, like, even if this thing is true, that means that whoever watches it is going to die. Like, why would you want to? I understand the concept of researching it, but like, why would you actually want to do it? Is beyond me. Anyway, so they're basically doing a student thesis project around this thing. And so they're trying to find, people that know anything about it, or they're interviewing people in the town to see if they know about it. It's like a documentary film project.
Think Blair Witch, but Peeping Tom.
Right. Exactly. And that's, again, like I said, a lot of these found footage movies it's like the same basic plot. They just kind of spin it a bit.
Right.
And this one, the spin is that instead of just cutting together the found footage to make the movie, which is what Gavin, that guy, was originally going to do, is basically he finds out that he's not going to be able to afford to do it. so the way that he tries to like get buzz about it is he like contacts another documentary crew to follow him around and his efforts to try to get this movie made.
Right.
So what he's doing is he's trying to make his own version of this movie. He's trying to recut it together to make his own version of the movie and then release it in theaters.
Well, because it wasn't cut. It was just, it never got finished. So he's like, I took their movie and I'm making it my movie.
Well, he took basically they did all the street work, and then he's just coming into being the editor, essentially. He's doing post-production on the stuff that they've already done.
Right.
So it basically starts off with like, they shows the girl of like, I only have whatever, a couple of blinks left. This is the last tape. I want you to put one part of this at the beginning and one part at the end. You'll know where to cut it. Basically this is my research into finding Peeping Tom. And then it goes through all her research and information. She has a camera guy named Feldman. What was her name? Stacy. I want to say Stacy. Yeah. So anyway, her name was Stacy. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But her cameraman's name was Feldman, and they were like trying to get this. So they got like a guy who was like a stare contest master winner, right? And he stared down the tunnel, and he was only, I think he made it to like 14 minutes or something.
Right. Yeah.
Which is like, again, they talked to like an actual like eye doctor who's like, yeah, this is like near physical limits of the human body to be able to not blink for that long.
By the way, I did look it up, and the record is like 40 minutes.
Yeah. That's the record. And this thing says you have to do it for an hour. It's like, okay, so this is not even physically possible.
Correct.
So anyway, yeah. So, and again, this eye doctor clearly says that that's not possible. And they try to get this stare contest guy to do it. He only makes it 14 minutes. Yeah, I think that's when they look up and they see that, yeah, even the world record holder can't do an hour. So then she essentially gets this idea that, well, if it only has to be like an unblinking eye staring down the tunnel, then why wouldn't a camera work? Right? Because a camera is like an eye, right? The lens is like the eye and it doesn't blink, right? Because the shutter would have to be closed for it to blink. And if you just leave it open for an hour, then technically the camera can do this. So they do that and they're like, oh, nothing happened, whatever. And they get all disappointed and they leave. And the next day, Feldman is like looking through the footage and he kind of like enhances it a bit. And he's like, look, and they look at the end of it and you can clearly see like it looks like a little person stands up, but it's like so far away that it's, it's like a little tiny pixelated thing. And then they show Gavin in the modern day, like cleaning it up. And like, you can see that it looks like a video game character, like pixel thing standing up. And he's like trying to show like, oh, look, we didn't, this isn't an effect. This is how I found it, blah, blah, blah. He's like trying to get people to get on board with his movie to like show that it's real. And everybody's like, yeah, well, I guess that's, we can look into it. But like, if this is the only proof you have, that's not enough.
Right.
And he's like, kind of upset about that, and he's like, yeah, whatever. I need to go do more. And so then Gavin's part, he goes to like these sound people. And he's like, oh, I want to clean the sound up, so the sound will sound good in a theater. This is where we find out that Gavin doesn't have any money. And that he's, his wife is saying, yeah, we don't have any money. I have to keep borrowing money from my parents. And then he's like, trying to like wheel and deal him like, oh, guys can come in and get a cut of the movie if you do this for free. And they're like, no, you got to pay us a lot of money. And we don't see what happens at that point in time, but we'll find out later.
And this is where Gavin becomes such a giant dick. This is at this point.
Well, at this point, but we don't find out until a little bit later. But yeah, at that point is when he does. And then back in the original project, we find out that Feldman has been doing experiments with the camera and like making it blink or whatever, because he finds out that every time he turns the camera on and off, he's able to see the thing getting closer and closer, like in random points when the camera's looking at stuff. Like they go to talk to their professor about the film project, and they find it in a building roof in the background. When they're driving to go talk to this guy who is supposedly an expert on peeping Tom. Like they see it on a street in the background. When they go to a bar to have a drink afterwards, you look out the window and you can see it, appear down a street down there. Like, but it's getting steadily closer as they go along. And then, he starts doing experiments about, showing it like in a football field where he's like, going, okay, look, off on, look, it's getting closer, off on, look, it's getting closer, off on, look, it's getting closer. And it gets really close to the camera. So you like clearly see it now. And like, looks like how everybody describes it. Like,
yeah,
like a black figure with like a black trench coat on with like a top hat, but it's like a shadow kind of creature. And then this is at the point where in the modern day kind of thing, they have like these kind of experts come in and give their opinion on it. So where they're all like, this is fake. Like again, the guy's like stepping in front of the camera every time the thing gets closer. Like it's very easy to cut and do effects that way. Like why wouldn't he just stand behind the camera and hit the button if that was truly what he was trying to do, which makes sense. They find out because earlier in the movie, they talk about everybody that they talk to, like they're they tried to find them like in records of schools, like, Feldman and Stacy, like, did they go to these schools? They couldn't find any records of it. They couldn't find any records of the professor who they actually have video footage of and know the name of, and they couldn't find her. And they couldn't find anybody else, the doctor, everybody else in this movie, but they end up finding the peeping Tom expert that they talked to. They end up finding out
weird states.
Right.
Weird,
yeah, I've seen those. Yeah, I've seen those books in bookstore. Yeah, he wrote like a weird whatever for all the 50 states. I don't know if it's all 50, but most of them. Yeah. So yeah, they do this. Like that's the actual guy that writes the books, and he was the guy. So they find out that okay, this guy, like, this isn't just a like fictional thing, because that's what they were thinking of. This was just a fictional thing of like actors that were done this. That's why they can't find these people. But they find out like, no, he was like, yeah, they interviewed me as Peeping Tom. It's not an actor. It wasn't a fake thing. Like that was it. And then they try to push him a little bit. Like, okay, well, why wasn't Peeping Tom in your, weird, I think it happened in Maryland, right?
Yeah.
Like weird Maryland. Where's your weird Maryland? How come Peeping Tom isn't in there? And he's like, well, because there wasn't enough to it. He's
it's fake lore.
Yeah. He's like, there wasn't enough to it. There was all the other stories that were in there had a lot more evidence or, a lot more basis to go on. Peeping Tom, there wasn't a whole lot there, so I didn't put it in the book. And again, like, until you came and talked to me, like, I never heard from those people again. He's like, I wouldn't have known anything.
Right.
So again, they just go on that. So we get this kind of like sub path of like, Gavin is intentionally, making this shit up. Or at least he's duped by them who made shit up. Because then we kind of get a sub thing. They're talking about how Stacy and Feldman made a project before, an award-winning documentary, that apparently they had faked in an actor to give a story about one of the, like, it was, what was it about? It was something like obituaries, but like moving obituaries or something. It was like pictures of The Departed or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
But anyway, so they wanted to get this one person's story, and that person wouldn't talk to them. So they basically got an actor to play that part, which obviously this is a documentary. You can't have actors in it. So that kind of snuck under the radar, and she ended up winning an award for it. But again, this was something that Gavin had cut out of the raw footage. He didn't want anybody to see that they talked about that. And he tried saying it wasn't relevant. But again, all these people that are trying to like judge the footage as real or fake is like, why would he cut that out if he didn't want people to think that maybe they did the same thing in this?
Right. And they're starting to say that, oh, this is all planned, that he's just trying to make his mark into the filmmaking world, that, he's clearly faking this stuff. Like, okay, if you saying this is real, why are you editing it? Why are you cleaning it up? Why are you making it pretty?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, again, and these are all valid points. Nobody's wrong at this point.
Right.
Yeah, so essentially all those kind of things, go through, and we kind of see Gavin's life falling apart at this point. And this is where, very rightfully so. Yeah, like the wife is like confronting him, saying like, "Hey, you're not doing weddings anymore. We don't have any income. Like, what are we going to do? I've been borrowing money from my parents, but like that's not going to be forever. Like, you need to figure this shit out." And he basically gives her the whole like, "I'm the man. I do what I want" kind of thing. And so like immediately she like leaves after that, and rightfully so, right? I mean, the guy's being a jerk. Anyway, the real reason she leaves is because she looks further into their finances after that, and she finds out that they had like a college fund for their son, and he had taken all the money out of the college fund to put towards the movie. Like, again, he had to pay those sound guys.
Right.
And he had to pay all these experts to like look at it and shit like that. So yeah, he stole all of the money out of the kid's account and lied about it. So that's why she like left. And so at this point, the actual documentary crew that's filming him they were just kind of behind the camera before. Now they become like kind of characters in the story, right? So we get to see like the director and the camera people there, who are all like, this is like messed up. Like we should stop this whole thing. Like this has gone too far, and they didn't hear from Gavin for a long time. And they basically heard, from like, oh, meet me at the tunnel at 11 PM. And this was like months later.
Right.
Or weeks later, at least.
Yeah.
So they like go there and they're all kind of discussing like, we shouldn't really, go forward with this. Like we shouldn't, feed into him. You know what I mean? We should let him to figure out his own stuff. Because us following us around with this thing is like kind of feeding into his, whole delusion, right? Of like whatever is going on here. And so they have this long conversation and they keep saying, the guy with the camera keeps saying, I'm going to run out of batteries. Which is like, why the fuck did you show up without batteries? And two, why the hell did you have a second battery? Like what the hell kind of documentary filmmaker guy? Anyway, so they go there and basically Gavin's there holding a camera to the tunnel, just like how Feldman did before.
Right.
And they're kind of trying to like talk to him and like figure out what's going on. And then like they see something at the end of the tunnel and then they're like chasing it down and then the camera dies.
Right.
So anyway, we get like a kind of like a thing afterwards. So we're like, Gavin was like, out of his mind kind of thing. And he ran away from him and they couldn't get him. And they don't know where he went. They have no idea where he went. And so then like they hear from him later. But anyway, we'll go back to the film project. So the film project, like Feldman was going back and forth, like he got closer. And then like apparently he said he had a plan to catch the thing.
Yes.
And he was going to enact this plan. And he had talked to her, to Stacy about the whole thing. And he said that, he tried like destroying the camera. He tried doing all kinds, whatever he did, the camera kept like coming back right to him. And it would be like turned on and looking at him and like watching him when he slept and stuff like that. So like we see a couple of scenes of like him sleeping and we see like the thing in the background in the mirror. And that's why like he would try to get rid of it and it would just come back. So like no matter what he did, this was going to come to an end. And he knew that. And so he was like planning. He basically was like having the camera look at a mirror so that he could see behind him. And he had other cameras set up in the room. So they were all looking around him so that there was no way to like hide around him or whatever.
Right.
And so then he was like basically kept turning the camera off and on and off and on and waiting until the thing got close enough to him and he was going to hit it with the hammer. And then basically like he got close enough to him and he's like, oh, it's fine. Like everything's there. And then like you see the thing's face like literally like right in front of the camera. And then like that's the end. And then you hear like there's a news report later on showing that he died.
Right.
I think they said of like heart failure or something.
Yeah.
And then at this point they show one of the guys that was debunking stuff talking about how, we zoomed in on this part and you can see in the thing's eyes like it looks like the tunnel, but not the tunnel of them looking at him. It's the tunnel of him looking at them from the other side of the tunnel. Like what it would look like with the camera light looking into the tunnel where he would have been at.
Right.
And somehow that's more realistic than the other way. I don't know why that's more realistic, but it is apparently. So at this point they're starting to think that like, okay, maybe this is like real or whatever. So in that kind of storyline is, I guess now it gets attached to her, even though I guess because they were both next to the camera. I don't know. They don't really say it, but anyway, so that's basically what it gets to her is she's trying to like figure out what to do with this thing. And then that's when she gets down to the point of, when she's filming the thing for, the project, where she says like, okay, you'll know where to make the cut, put the beginning at the front and this other end at the end. And then this is the part at the end is essentially it cuts back to that scene. And now she's like, I think I found a way to beat it. And she basically like cuts out her own eyes with glass chunks.
Not her No, I think she cut off her eyelids because she said the woman can go blind, but she still blinks. So if she cuts her eyelids so she can't blink, he can't get any closer.
Whatever.
That's why I took it as.
Whatever it is. She's basically stabbing herself in the eyes with the piece of glass.
Yes.
So anyway, then we jump back to the real world thing with Gavin. So where apparently Gavin contacted the documentary crew again. This is after another couple of weeks. And he's like, they basically said to come to this hotel. And so they go to the hotel and they go in the hotel and they see like, it's all like dirty and trash and garbage everywhere. And they see like all these like GoPros all set up all around the room. And there was like cameras on the table and there was like cameras basically everywhere.
How Feldman was. Yeah.
Right. So they're checking through everything. And all the cards from all the cameras are gone. So like you can't see any of the footage that happened there. But they find the box of original tapes. They're like, okay, put these back in the car. We'll take these. So they go to put them back in the car. And then after they do that, they basically they open up the bathroom door and they find out that Gavin is dead in the bathroom.
Yep.
So they call the police and everything. And the police basically say he died of heart failure.
At 39.
At 39. Right. So they're saying like, that's essentially how it ended is they think that he did the camera thing with a peeping Tom to try to prove his existence and ended up getting killed because of it.
Yep.
And I guess the finale of the film is, or at least what they wanted the finale of the film to be, is he goes on this radio station to like try to hype up his movie because he like nobody wants to like release it, so he decides to like release it like on his own website.
Yeah.
And so he does that, and to do that, he does like this radio interview. When he does a radio interview, everybody keeps calling it the radio place, like basically saying like, "Hey, you're a ripoff of the Blair Witch. Everybody's doing the same old bullshit. You should stop doing it. You're wasting everybody's time. This sucks." And then the final nail in the coffin is the actual director of the Blair Witch Project comes on and basically tells him, "Yeah, this sucks. I don't know what you were trying to do, but you failed in doing it. So like, you need to figure out another way to do this or another way to present this because this is just not good."
Right. And
that's essentially what put him on the path to the hotel room was that.
Yep.
And that's essentially like where it ends.
Yeah, I mean the film crew that was filming him, they're trying to figure out how do we end this, and he's trying to find a way to end it with them, and so it kept going farther. And the next step is he was the film guy trying to put together the film of Peeping Tom from previous people. Now they are now in Gavin's spot, and their director starts going a little bit crazy too. Like, how do we end this?
Right, and I think the very last thing is they found. Right before that, I think the same thing where he said like what hotel he was in or whatever.
Yeah.
He sent them a tape, and when they played the tape, it was basically a tape of Stacy alive in the current timeline in like a mental institution.
Right, and she was feeling butterfly kisses on her face.
Right. Yeah. So essentially, she couldn't blink anymore if what you're saying is true, like their eyelids are gone, she can't blink anymore, but because she never completed it, he's always still right there.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that's the very, very end.
Yes. What was your first thought on this?
I gotta say, okay, well, this was gonna be in my low points, but I'll just say it now. I hate the name of this movie. If I looking at the name Butterfly Kisses, I would never have watched this movie. Like, just hearing that name would have been like, nope. I wouldn't even have got as far as like looking at synopsis or anything. Like, I would be like, no, this is a stupid movie. I could have told you that from the name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was basically I I just hated that name so much, and every time they said it, I was like, just stop saying it. There's a better way to say this. I know there is. Just stop it.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's presented well. I mean, it's an interesting, fun kind of movie. I mean, I think you're supposed to like hate Gavin. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things that happen. I'll get into that and my highs, lows. But yeah, I mean, overall, it was all right. It was all right.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting that they were essentially, making fun of film documentary and people that make movies like this while making the movie themselves.
Right. Yeah. While doing the same thing.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And, and I thought that was an interesting take, and saying this guy's just trying to do this to become famous, all this stuff, and bringing in real life people in the actual community, trying to give it more credence was pretty interesting to me too. Having the guy who created Blair Witch actually be there too as himself. There's a lot of people as themselves in this.
Well, yeah, but it's essentially in the current day.
Right.
All of the people that are talking are all famous people. Like the guy that's like trying to find inconsistencies in the video is a guy who like made a Bigfoot documentary. Like
Bigfoot, yeah.
Right, which is like essentially the Bigfoot thing is all about like analyzing video to see if this is Bigfoot or not. So it makes sense that he would be the guy that does that. Yeah, like the guy that they're talking to is like, Matt Lake, the guy that actually wrote those weird, state books.
Yeah.
Like he actually knows a lot about the stuff. Like, yeah, he's like in it like as like an actor, but also as himself.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's like I said, it's an interesting concept. I mean, it's definitely, it's like a mind experiment to figure out like the layers of it.
Right. And it seems like the layers of it is, a bad ending, and the layers keep going, because then you're going to have someone, the real film crew going after Gavin is like, okay, how do we complete this? And then eventually they become more obsessed with the idea of Peeping Tom. So it's an urban legend that builds upon itself that may not have been true, but then becomes true because they believed in it and did stuff to make it actually happen. In a way, right?
Sure.
Now, Peeping Tom, not a real folklore. That is fake lore, 100%.
I assumed. I mean, I was
just like Blair Witch. Yeah.
Right.
But no, I mean, it was like I said, interesting concept, and the diving into the madness, and the really poking fun of the found footage idea while doing a found footage. Pretty meta for this area.
Well, like I said, there's lots of meta layers in this movie.
Yeah. What about highlights for you though?
Highlights, I mean, I like the format of it. I really like that it's like a documentary made about a found footage movie. Well, it's a documentary about a guy making a found footage movie out of another found footage movie that he found.
Right.
So, yes, there's like 4 layers to the movie. I mean, but again, it's interesting. I mean, it's put together well. You don't really get confused. You know what's going on the whole time.
Yeah.
But it's like, so it's, again, documentary of all of that happening, and that was fun. We already talked about the real people that were involved in this, like the actual real people. Like, I mean, obviously they're talking about a fake subject, but it's real people that you would probably want to know their opinion on the thing if it was real.
Correct.
So it's an interesting multi-layered thing. I don't know where they would have got the concept of this, but it's interesting for sure.
Oh yeah.
What about you?
No, exactly to the same thing as the highlight was for that. And I like the fact that, eventually being the director or filmographer, becoming obsessed with it and completing it. It's it is an obsession. And as the film crew points out to, the director following Gavin, is like, hey, not everything has to be made. We could stop it here. He's like, no, I have to continue. We have to finish this. And the obsession with it is really there too. I like the fact that, even in the earlier, say 2007, 2008 world, that, Feldman's like, oh, he's really good at what he does. He could be faking this the entire time. So she, Stacy's like, did he fake this? His notebook's like, is this a detail of his plans for faking it? Or is this actually his notebook that he was doing there?
Right. Yeah, they're trying to say there's like multiple layers of there might be fake stuff, right? Like back in the old footage stuff, it might be Feldman making fake stuff to impress Stacy,
Right.
or it might be Stacy making up fake stuff to impress Feldman. It might be Gavin making up stuff to make, one, he might have staged this whole thing. Like, two, Stacy and Feldman might have staged the whole thing with actors and everything. That Gavin, maybe this is a true thing that happened and Gavin is just adding things to it or cutting it to make it seem like it's worse than it is. I mean, there's like a million possibilities of what it could be.
Right.
Almost all of them are pointing towards this is hoax. This is not real.
Right. Yeah, I think that depth to it was done pretty well.
Right.
What about your low points?
Number one, the name. I hate the name of this movie. This is the stupidest. They could have come up with anything. I call it like Peeping Tom. Called it Blink Man.
Yeah.
Anything else besides Butterfly Kisses is the stupidest name. I mean, ever that is just Gavin. Like Gavin, he did so many stupid, crappy things, and he was such a jerk about it.
Yes.
Like again, he stole his kids' college fund. Like that's horrible. He's basically stealing someone else's idea and then cutting it to be like his own thing, right? And then like he's trying to show it to all these people to try to get them involved, and they're like, yeah, okay, like we don't really believe all this. Like there's not enough here, and he's getting all upset with everybody, like upsetting them to the point where they're like kicking him out, like telling like get the hell out of here. Like the sound guys is like, oh, you guys can get in on the ground floor, and they're like, nope, we got to pay us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just Gavin was kind of a jerk. I mean, I didn't feel bad when he got killed. Like he did it to himself.
Yeah. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Gavin seemed pretty normal at the very beginning. Then that downward spiral, just like he showed how much of an ass he really, really was. It's like, yeah, college fund's one thing. His wife leaving with a note. He deserved the note. He didn't deserve to be told to the face. The worst way possible. And yeah, you're talking about all these people like, oh, you owe it to me. Hey, I'm bringing this to the supernatural community. And everyone's like, oh, this is going to be a standing ovation. I'm going to become world famous for this. And then just his spiral into madness.
Right.
Really happened really quickly.
Right.
So yeah. And then, yeah, butterfly kisses. Like I said, I had to look it up what that meant. It is when you apparently people do this with their kids, their newborns. You put your eyelashes on them to tickle them. And I was watching this with the wife, and I'm like, have you ever heard of anyone doing this to their baby? She goes, no. I'm like, I haven't either.
Yeah. I don't know. I sure as hell never heard of it.
No. Maybe it's an East Coast thing. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, Butterfly Kisses, what wasn't the name of the documentary they were making? Like they said, they call it something else. And it, and the Four Fingered Hand Studios is also pushing this as being a real thing too. I don't know. Are you sick of that trope? Yeah, in found footage, it being passed off as being real, and even in the credits.
I mean, I think that's the point of it.
Yeah.
I think you got to commit to it to make it fun. I mean, yeah, obviously you realize that it's not real. I mean, it's a movie.
Right.
These people are actors and stuff, but I think just sticking with it. Again, you have to. Again, you're just sticking with your whole thing, even all the way to the end. That's okay with me. I don't mind.
Okay. But yeah, that's pretty much it though for the low point. Gavin was a huge low point. Like I understand we weren't supposed to be rooting for him, but he went downhill fast.
Yes, he sucks.
Yeah. All right. Well, why don't you start this time? How many bad VHS effects out of 10 do you give this?
I will say I will give it 5.85 bad VHS effects out of 10.
So slightly better than Borderlands.
Slightly
Very
better than
slightly.
Borderlands, slightly less than Poughkeepsie Tapes, yes.
I mean, I think I'm gonna watch this definitely again. Like I said, the fact that it got as that deep as it did, in layer wise, as deep as it did. Yeah, I agree. It is legit in between Borderlands and Poughkeepsie Tape. So 7.75 for me. Bad VHS effects out of 10. I mean, so overall, how do you feel about our dive into the found footage genre that wasn't VHS?
I mean, I do like the format. They're just, again, there's a lot of these that I did not watch because a lot of them came out during that time period where I didn't care about horror movies, and found footage was just like the easiest thing to do.
Right. Yeah.
So there's like a lot of them that came out. Some of them I did go back and watch later on, like mostly the bigger named ones. But that's about it.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I skipped a lot of these too. I was jaded of found footage for a very long time as well. No, I'm interested to see where these other things take us, because I've only seen Wreck, I've only seen Quarantine 1. I haven't realized there was 3 other Wrecks out there. I realized there was a Quarantine 2. And
I know,
it's just a genre
yeah.
that I steered away from for a while. It's gonna be nice to get back to it though.
Right. Like, yeah, I know I watched Quarantine. I want to say I might have watched Quarantine 2. But I don't think I've seen any of the Wrecks though. Because I know they're Spanish, right?
Yes, they are Spanish.
Yeah, I don't think I watched any of them. But Quarantine I know, because that was
Jennifer Carpenter.
Yeah, Dexter's sister.
Yep.
Yeah, as I remember watching that, and I'm pretty sure I watched the second one, because I remember the second. Is the second one with, or maybe it's the same movie? The one with, is there like a SWAT team that gets stuck in the building with them?
That's the first one.
Okay, maybe it was just the first one I saw then.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Cool. Why don't you go ahead and bring us home?
Okay. Yeah. So we're closing now. Okay. Bacon. I smell Kevin Bacon. Do we tremor? Do we stir echoes as we go footloose? How many degrees of separation can we find as we go into our first ever actor spotlight? Join us next time as we dive into Stir of Echoes, Flatliners, and You Should Have Left. All movies starring the great Kevin Bacon.
Yes.
So yeah, those 3 next week. And remember, we watch bad movies, so you don't have to.
And this is Graveyard saying, have you checked on the children?
This is Salem saying, long live the new flesh.
Good night.
Good night.